is this House believes in citizens' right to bear arms. Without any further ado, I would like to call on the first opposition speaker to open the debate.
When crimes happen in the blink of an eye and you have no ability to react at that very particular moment in time, most victims get hurt, most victims die. Because the police officers fail to get there in time, the police officers fail to immobilize your perpetrator in time, you are a victim of the state's failure in these circumstances. We want to mitigate those harms. Our policy reduces the likelihood of these situations happening. We want more people to live. Before I move on to my two arguments, I have a model to present to you. Firstly, we will have universal background checks that you always have that's already given to other countries like this. We will check on your criminal life, we will enter the federal database if we have to know more about you. We will even have random checkups once you've already given up your license to see how you're doing with it. If you are not fulfilling the criteria that we've already given to you, you will write your license will be revoked. We'll have psychological tests, just like how we have psychological tests to determine the rehabilitation of prisoners, because we want to ascertain how rehabilitated you are, we want to see what your reactions will be. We'll have a similar psychological test to see how you handle a gun and how you function as a person with that much power in your hands. Secondly, we'll have training to ensure that the person has the capacity to make decisions in point in time, that the capacity to use the gun to its optimum level. We'll have tests like pressure tests to see what happens under pressure, where you don't always have to kill a person, but even in the event where you have to, you can kill a person. And what do you do at that point in time? Similar to how we have tests in driving licenses. But thirdly, most importantly, every gun will have a serial number, and every bullet that you shoot will have a serial number. So anything at any point in time that a gun is shot, or any bullet is released, you are liable for that action, you are liable for the shot of that gun. And that's the model. Two primary problems for you. Number one, even in the most secure nations in the world, like the United States of America, where a lot of its budget is allocated to defense and security within that nation, a lot of people are having issues with police force because police forces just have too many things to do and too little time to do it, even in the worst case scenario. Secondly, criminals have more leverage to commit crimes because they're able to premeditate their crimes and know that most of their victims are defenseless, so it's much easier to go and handle that victim. Therefore, I can do whatever I want. Sure, your side can upgrade all the defense systems you have, but there is no way a policeman can save you at that point in time when a man points a gun at your head, because you'll probably be dead within the next 3 seconds. In these circumstances, we need you to have the instantaneous reaction to protect yourself. Before that, sure.
Last shooting at elementary schools killed more than 20 children, killed more than 6 staff members. In light of such massive school shootings, how does the proposition justify that bearing arms create a healthier society for the rest of our society?
Because in these circumstances, we will have as many tests as possible to reduce the likelihood of this happening. In these circumstances, we will not simply give the gun to any random person that comes to you and says, I want to own a gun. We will have checks on you to make sure that you don't do it in the future. But my two arguments, why is it principally justified to allocate this right to individuals? But number two, why guns are the best method of self-defense and a person should have this ability to defend himself? Two levels. Number one, why is the state's communal duty to recognize this and extend its duty of care to the people? Because the states have to recognize that the police can never protect you at every single point in time and every single moment and circumstance that you're in. And that's why, because a lot of crimes happen when A, it's too fast to react, or when B, when it's very hard for you to call the police for them to get to your place in time, or C, where even in the event that you do get to call the police, the point in which your police gets to the scene of the crime at that moment is too late, and the crime is already done, the damage has already been committed. In these circumstances, which is a majority of crimes that have already existed, no thank you madam, these are the problems that exist, we need to mitigate these problems. The state's primary objective is to allow people to enjoy and extend their lifestyle. The states always ensure that people get to maximize the ability to live as a person. That's why we give you welfare, that's why we give you healthcare that's free, even if you don't really work for it. Or even organ transplants to smokers that actively harm their own lungs in these circumstances. We want you to best maximize your own ability to live. This is a simple extension of that, where in the event where you cannot be protected, you need to have the ability to protect yourself. You should go ahead and do it for yourself. No thank you. But secondly, in the event of people's rights to safety, sure, it's a universal existence that you cannot simply go and kill a person like that. But that value is ignored when you are under pressure, when you have to use it for self-defense. So when it's self-defense, it's alright if you kill a person, although people believe that killing is wrong in the circumstances. Similar to that, the states have to understand that you have to have the maximum ability to defend yourself. Because there is no way that the state can guarantee that a knife can defend yourself, that a baseball bat can defend yourself in circumstances, but it's definitely believable that you can save yourself with a gun, which I'll show you for my second argumentation. Before I move on to my second argument, anyone?
Yeah. We have this that provides the maximum ability to defend oneself. What happens if that same weapon provides the maximum ability to kill another?
We think in these circumstances, it's very simple. First of all, we already told you that we have universal right, universal check and balance for this individuals to begin with. But secondly, and most importantly, in the event, for example, like in Japan, for example, where they have a severe decrease in the crimes that are already happening, and the crimes that are committed are not by the people who have the guns to begin with, but there's a 29% decrease in crime. These are significant benefits that you can gain from getting these circumstances. In these events, where people have less of a likelihood to do so, we don't see why any of it will happen. But secondly, most importantly, why guns are the best method of self-defense and why people should get it. Because firstly, it's easier to conceal. For example, a Glock gun, where you can conceal it in any part of your body or any part of your back in some places, it's easier for you to just immediately remove. The criminal will not know about it, and it's easier for you to go and use that gun and defend yourself within circumstances. Unlike a knife, for example, which is the next best alternative, it's harder to conceal. And when you're attacking someone with a knife to defend yourself, it's very obvious and explicit, and he can react in the best method possible. Secondly, guns are far more effective than any method to do so. No, thank you, sir. They're far more effective than to immobilize your operation in these circumstances. Why? Because when it comes to it's easier when it comes to shooting in these circumstances. Why? Because criminals can disarm anyone, and most of the time criminals have the leverage over victims because victims are defenseless. Criminals can disarm you because a gun is more powerful than a knife, a gun is more powerful than a baseball bat. With that in mind, you can always disarm a person and let the person know, put your gun down, I'm going to shoot you with it. These are the kinds of problems that exist because people don't have the capacity to maximize the right to self-defense. When you have a gun and you have a gun that is as good as that weapon that's being used as a perpetrator, or probably even better, the weapon that's being used as a perpetrator, it's far more effective when it comes to defending yourself in these situations. We think it's important to recognize that to begin with. No, thank you. But it's faster to immobilize this. And when it comes to reactions, because within that split second minute, you have no capacity to think about your decision. Unless you can, you have no ability to go and reach for your knife that's in the other side of your house, or you have no capacity to go and run to the telephone and call the police at that particular point. That means within these situations, in these moments, you have no choice but to do so. But thirdly, and the nature of not crimes is that it's very spontaneous and very, very instant, like rape, like murder. When these kinds of things happen, or when mugging, for example, these are the kinds of crimes that happen when the police is incapable of helping you. You must help yourself. You don't have the time to react in these circumstances. You can shoot that person if he wants to rape you, or he wants to shoot you in those circumstances. But the last level and last important benefit is that it's a communal defense, and it's a communal benefit to begin with. Sure, not every single individual within your community will own a gun, but a criminal is less likely to go and commit a crime within that community, knowing that there are people within the community having a gun in circumstances. That's beneficial because it doesn't mean that every single individual has to own a gun. As long as few people own it, it's a benefit for every other person out there. It's a benefit for your neighbor, it's a benefit for the person who's in the back making the transaction with you. These are the kinds of things that come with a gun. It's a communal benefit, everyone is protected. This debate is about who can save more lives at the end of the day. This is the side that deals with the most spontaneous crimes that happen. That is the side that does nothing.
And now the slide be recognized on the first opposition speaker to open the opposition stage.
Team Malaysia says that when crimes happen today, it's usually very swift and therefore unpreventable. We agree, crimes are swift. But when this is the case, ladies and gentlemen, it usually happens to the sound of a bang and to the smell of a smoking gun. Crimes have gotten so quicker, and the community of crime management has advanced because the weapons have been upgraded, ladies and gentlemen. When we used knives in the past and blades before, now we have ammunition and firepower. That is how the guns have changed society. It has not changed us into a society where security is our first concern, where security is actually kept. It has turned us into a society obsessed about our own individual being. It has turned us into a society that is every man for himself and it cannot trust their neighbors. I'm going to deny everything they said about communal security and about how guns are good. Now, as the Prime Minister, I have the duty to introduce to you our three arguments. The first is the harms to society. The second is about governmental responsibility. And my second speaker, Chan, will come up here and explain about the burden shift and how it will happen and perpetuate vigilante justice. He's going to talk about the future harms to our society if this motion is ever passed. But before I go on to explain the first argument, the harms to society, I have several things to present to Team Malaysia and to the judges. First of all, about their burdens. They have burdens today as the government side. First of all, they have to prove how society can ensure security without guns to start with. Will society without guns in general be better off? That is the question of today's debate. Whereas today, Malaysia's case has been mostly based on having a gun better than your neighbors. That is under the premise that someone in society has guns. Opposition wants to make a society, as they said, like in Japan or in our very own country, Korea, where there are no guns to start with. That is the only time when we can start fairly debating this debate, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm going to run the even if case as I do my rebuttals. Second, they have to provide that the harms of not owning a gun are going to be much bigger than the possible offenses that you can perpetuate while owning a gun. In my POI, I asked the Prime Minister whether he believes that the best maximum possibility of defense can also turn into a mutation, the best method of offense. In opposition, we believe that more than the power to defend yourself with guns, you are granted an ultimate superiority over your victims, and therefore turning everyone in society into a potential victim, ladies and gentlemen. Now, finally, they provided us two problems. Number one, secure nations also have concerns with their security. They identified the United States of America as a secure nation. Opposition does not believe that the United States of America is the most secure nation in the world, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, a great portion, if not the majority of their crimes happening in civil society are caused by the existence of firearms. Because people can let themselves go 30 rounds a minute, then the pool of people affected is going to be much bigger. Therefore, America is not a secure nation. Opposition rather points to Japan or Switzerland as a secure nation. These countries have one of the strictest gun regulations in the entire world. And since they kindly identified Japan as the country with secure regulations, we'd like to thank them for pointing to a country that has no guns to start with. Second, more leverage. Indeed, criminals have more leverage because they said that victims have more leverage over their crimes. But then again, ladies and gentlemen, haven't I already told you that the criminals are the ones with the advantage? Because these are the ones who are going to access the guns in the first place. If they're not going to prove, and they already denied in their case that not everybody is going to carry around a gun, how are you going to defend cases like rape, which is the most prevalent crime in civil society in the United States of America? When they have guns, rape is still prevalent. If they cannot defend this, then the proposition falls on their own justification. Do you have an answer?
If we are living in a upgraded society where crimes are more dangerous because of the existence of guns, shouldn't people have the ability to match up to the level of danger by protecting themselves with a similar weapon?
I understand, sir. And while I'm going to address that very concern of a potential arms race in my first argument on harms to society, I'll briefly touch over it. Once again, Malaysia is basing on the premise that there are guns to start with and only a portion of society is armed with firearms. We have to get rid of this notion and debate whether having guns in society in general is good, and on Korea's side, having no guns at all in society is good. That is the crux of today's motion, ladies and gentlemen. Now, their first argument was on the justification. It says they maximizes their own ability, but I believe I already justified this by saying that it maximizes the perpetrator's ability to cause harm on that victim. They said that there's a universal right to safety. Indeed, there is a universal right to safety. Everyone deserves to be safe, ladies and gentlemen. And if your safety is perpetrated or encroached by a person who has the potential to kill you with a firearm, then we say as a government that for the masses and their benefits, we should take that gun away. We also wholeheartedly agree with Malaysia's justification. Their second argument about the best method. Of course the gun is the best method, ladies and gentlemen, not for defense, but for murder. Guns have been the perpetrators and the causers of most heavy crimes, heinous crimes in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And saying that it's the best method to defense is just the same as saying that it's the best method for offense. Indeed, they are efficient methods of killing. Please sit down. Finally, they said that it can create a system of communal defense. But isn't this a contradiction against their argument that it's every man for themselves, that every person has to guard their own body because crime has gone swifter and swifter, and there's a new paradigm of perpetuation? If they're arguing for communal defense and group security, we'd rather delegate the responsibility to where it actually belongs, the police. Now, finally, I'm going to go on to my arguments. The first argument is going to talk about the general harms to society. I have three levels of analysis here. First, what are guns? I'm going to talk about the nature of guns, and this is very self-explanatory. They are tools specifically designed to maximize harm on the target, ladies and gentlemen. They are tools and machines designed to kill. Therefore, they are weapons of bad omen. They are tools of bad omen. But the second one is more important. How it facilitates violence. It facilitates violence by projecting it on a larger scale than what is necessary. We have evolved from the possibility of a butter knife to an M16. And an intentional, malicious use of a butter knife is always going to be much smaller than the accidental use of an M16 salvo, ladies and gentlemen. Please sit down. So, crime has gotten to a scale that is before unimaginable. That's why bank robberies are more possible than it was before. Second, it causes the encouragement of action. When there is an option on the table, ladies and gentlemen, that is more readily available than it was before, there is a higher possibility for that person who is going to decide to choose that very option than compared to the situation when it didn't exist in the first place. Which is why Team Korea brings up the example of our neighboring country, Japan, which has arguably the world's strictest gun regulations. Since the option of using a firearm to perpetuate crime is not there on the table in the first place, the Japanese people tend not to resort to criminal activity, but rather can take it to the courts to resolve some sort of injustice, ladies and gentlemen. That's why